Play is probably one of the most important fabrics of life. It's the part that enables you to really emerge as a human being or as an animal. Play is fundamental. It's what enables us to explore, to encourage, and to find out for ourselves. And if you don't actually build that into your brain development as you go when you're very young, then it can become very sterile, possibly grey. And certainly from historical research, a lack of play would lead to lots of things, including dying, which is fairly permanent. And extremes from that are when you see things like Romania and orphanages where children are limited to maybe an hour a day of contact and stimulation, and they become little more than vegetables. They're regarded as retarded. Fortunately, when they came out of the orphanages, quite a lot of them did revert back, but it was a staggering insight into the importance of something that is regarded as a frippery by most people. The confusion is that the difference between learning and education, that play is a facilitator for learning. I call myself, amongst lots of other things, a learning enabler as opposed to a teacher. And the educational part should be a secondary, whereas it's being seen as a foundation at the moment. The first part of exploring and exploding as a human being is getting that ability, that innate interest in learning, not in being educated, but in learning and exploring and discovering, that you can then build on as an educator. And that's what I think is missing. I think the top-down approach, which is still very much prevalent today, of saying, okay, we need to push education down further and further, it's fundamentally flawed. That what we need to do is push learning further and further up. I've seen so many secondary classes where children are so bored with what's going on because they don't know how to enjoy learning. And if they don't know how to enjoy learning, you're not going to teach them anything, or very limited amounts. You might teach them by rote to pass an exam, but it's not about learning life skills. The fundamentals of play are about developing the brain, something that I think every parent should know. Or two things. The first is that 70% of the brain is developed by the time you're 4. So get it wrong, and you've wasted that first 70%. The second thing that I don't think people understand, which is where sort of my views on technology with younger children comes in partly into play, is that the brain takes 3 main ingredients to develop, if one wants to look at it very simply. The first is that you need mental stimulation, so the ability to learn, the ability to explore, and so on. Second is good nutrition. So the right food, not just food, but the right kind of food. There's modern things about 5 a day or 10 a day or whatever. Fresh cooked food served well rather than processed food, which is full of salt and sugars. And the third thing is physical development. The brain develops when you exercise, when you're outside, when you're involved in air and water and all the other good things that are provided outdoors and in, frankly. Those are the ingredients that make brains. And if you don't get, again, that right in the first 4 or 5 years, then what then follows is something that's very, very difficult to put right. Not impossible, but then the challenge is, how do you make it right? When in fact you could make a much simpler approach of saying, getting it right in the first place, and you don't have to worry about that second bit. I suppose really enthralls me about play is that, play is about being freely chosen, and in freely choosing, you might decide to do something that is fairly mundane or sedentary by somebody else's opinion, but by your opinion, it's really important to you. So people can become, as they have in the past, carpenters or artists or plumbers or dustmen or whatever, because they want to be, as opposed to because it's the only job that's available for me in the situation that I'm in. Nursery group is called Child First. And one parent did say to me, why did she choose that name? And I thought, well, it's fairly obvious, the child is the person we come first. I do believe that fundamentally. Here at Welbeck, we saw a real opportunity to start to explore how, I suppose I've been trying to do it for the last 20, 30, 40 years. The move towards open-ended resources was very important to me. I wanted to ensure that the inside and the outside were equally as important, because I have a passion for the outdoors, but equally I recognise there are some times, like today when we've got a 60-mile-an-hour wind, when you need to be a little bit more circumspect about being near trees and things. But the aim of it is to give children the opportunity of exploring themselves rather than us exploring for them, and being The phrase that I've used for many years, but it's still not quite captured, is descriptive rather than prescriptive. All of the things around us that you see we build ourselves in our factory are designed to be open-ended. They're designed not to be a particular thing, and quite often it gets frustrating when you talk to an adult and says, okay, what can you do with this spool? And the answer is anything you want to. And it does roll on its side, and it can be used as a table or a seat, obviously. More fundamental part of it, because it's a beautiful building, it's a beautiful environment, and not everybody has that opportunity. The most important part of it, in fact, is beautiful staff who recognise that playing is the most important ingredient in this, as opposed to the thing that you do before nappy changing or before tea or before dinner. And having good food and good resources are important to them, but if they can't use them, they're mentally capable of not using them, or they want to be too regimented in how they use them, it would fail. But the staff here are both competent and capable of knowing that planning is probably the least important thing they do rather than the most important thing they do. Knowledge and ability to be able to explore things with those children is the thing that's important, not the fact that you're playing with Lego today or today's art or tomorrow's sport. Staff, fundamentally, it's very, very simple. 70% of the brain is developed by the time you're 4. In fact, it's more like 85 by the time you're 7 or 8. And that's the time when they're most malleable. Their ability to take in the sponge-like qualities that they have. We need to understand that to get the right quality, you need to invest quite a lot of money into it. You need to have the right resources, albeit that some of them are recycled and upcycled. You need to be selective about the things that you use. And you need the right kind of environment. Would I have a nursery that didn't have a garden outside? And the answer is absolutely not. Do I know day nurseries that have got no space outside? And the answer is absolutely yes. Fundamentally, again, it's about not having the right resources for the children, whether it's staff or whether it's the outdoors or whether it's the kind of equipment you're using, that will fail those children.